Is God for the first time speaking to man. He's inviting man to understand him. Genesis chapter 4, verse number 7. He's speaking to Cain for the first time. And he's saying, why are you so depressed? Why are you so crestfallen? Why are you so discouraged? Cain, God is speaking to this man. Because this man attempted to do something. He was a failure before God. So this is God's invitation to Cain, who's a failure. Probably you are a failure today. Probably you're discouraged today. Probably you're discontent with the way life is going on. Probably you've been attempting to please God over a period of time, but you're so disappointed that your best efforts were worthless. And you're crying on the inside saying, God, how can I please you? How can your desire be my crowning glory? And God is saying, if you do well, you can please me. 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse number 27. There is an instance in this man's life, in this God-pleaser's life, where it was difficult moment, and here, when the mourning was past, that means the child born to David and Bathsheba had died. When the mourning had passed, God sent and fetched, David sent and fetched Bathsheba to the house, and she became his wife. And then she bore a son for him, who happened to become Solomon. But then the thing that David had done displeased God. Colossians chapter 1, verse number 10, that you might walk worthy of the Lord unto all pleasing, being fruitful in every good work, and increasing in the knowledge of God. 1 John chapter 3, verse number 22. And whatsoever we ask, if you are a God pleaser, whatsoever we ask, we receive of him, if you are a God pleaser. Because we keep his commandments, do those things that are pleasing to him. And so in Matthew chapter 3, verse number 17, Jesus went and got baptized. And John baptized him after a discussion. And Jesus insisted that he wants to be a God pleaser. And John said, no, you are too big, you are too great, I'm not even worthy to touch your shoelaces or untie your shoelaces. And so Jesus said, no, you don't go by emotion, you don't go by feeling, you don't go by the decree, or you don't go by age, neither go by the authority levels, go by God pleasing. So he said, for righteousness' sake baptize me. And then a voice from heaven said, this is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. See, Jesus was a God pleaser. Matthew chapter 17, verse number 5. There was a bright cloud overshadowed them, and the voice came out and said this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. This is the last phase of his ministry. So before you get to understanding how to please God, we go to answer the basic question to figure out the will of God. But the issue is not knowing the will of God. The issue is doing the will of God. And the issue is the will of God is not a mystery. The will of God is already declared. Mark chapter 3, verse number 35, it says, whosoever shall do the will of God, the same as my brother, my mother, my sister. Who says this? Jesus. And so, when a person is doing the will of God, a lot of things happen in their life. So first of all, how to do the will of God. Ephesians chapter 6, verse number 6. Not with eye service as men pleasers, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. You will be able to do the will of God when you're sincere at your work. Not with eye service as men pleasers, doing the will of God. Because God is watching your heart. Then don't be a men pleaser. Don't be an actor at your work. Don't pretend at your work. Find to do work. Find work. You can find work. You are creative. You have an ability. You can do it and become an asset for your company and your workplace. Be a God pleaser. God wants you to raise you and make you the head and not the tail. Who will be so? The one who does the will of God. Even as you are trying to snitch away time, trying to do all kinds of naughty things there, I want you to know you're becoming your own stumbling block. The favor of God has been restricted, not by some awkward thing. You are restricting the favor of God because you are not doing the will of God. And then you say after 10 years nothing has happened, progress has not come, things are stagnant. Why will they be stagnant? God says, I will give you increase. God says, you are a gift. God says, I put favor upon you. Why is all these things not working? It's because you are not doing the will of God where you should be doing the will of God. It's time for us to do the will of God. So the first one is to be a God pleaser, doing the will of God. Second one, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse number 3. This is the will of God, that you should abstain from fornication. This is the will of God. Even your sanctification, that you should abstain from pornography and save your eyes. Matthew chapter 5, verse number 28 and 29 talks about it. It says, if you look at a woman and lust after her, then you have committed adultery. And then it goes on to say, and if your eyes offend thee, if your right eye offend thee, pluck it out from your heart and throw it away. For it is profitable. It's better for you to go into heaven than to be cast into hell. Why? Your eyes can take you to hell. Your eyes have a different mind of its own, has got a different desire of its own, away from your desire. You don't desire, yet your eyes are able to desire completely away from your desire. Are you understanding this? That's what God is saying. Your eyes can take you to hell, so it's better for you to pluck your eyes out, throw it, and you go to heaven. Why? Because your eyes have got a capability of its own. So in 1 John it says, the lust of the eyes itself has got its own lust. Job chapter 31 verse number 1, he goes on to say, I made a covenant with my eyes that I will not lust after a maid. Matthew chapter 6 verse number 22 talks about this. It says, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore the eye be single, whole body shall be full of light. But in the next verse it says, if there is darkness, then the whole body will be full of darkness. And so the Bible is saying this, if the light of the body of the eye, if the eye be evil, that means the eye is negative, functioning wrong, then the whole body will be full of darkness. That means demonic spirits are able to come. But this is one part of it. The other part of it is something a lot more serious about your eye. If you do not know how to take care of your eyes and stay away from pornography like the Word of God says, because it says this is the will of God, the other part of the story is a person who dwells on such things is now disturbing the core or the seat or the root of his personal power. That means you're destroying yourself. The root of your personal power. What is the seat of a man's power? The seat of a man's power is his imagination. So when a man or a woman is dwelling on things like this, he's destroying the seat of his imagination or the seat of their power. That means the devil is attacking the root of that person. And so in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse number 4 and 5, it says this. It says, the weapons of your warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God, through the pulling down of strongholds, casting down every imagination. Imagine this, that the first level and the main thing concerning you is your imagination. That means your creative power is being destroyed. What's the difference between man and the animal kingdom and the bird kingdom? Your imagination. You can go and live in Antarctica. You can go and live in Sahara and come back safe. It's because you can engage the powers of nature with your creative power. That's your imagination. If that is destroyed, then you just become a vegetable in the hands of the devil. This is the will of God, that you retain your creative power, that you can work and walk with God. First one is, be a God pleaser. Don't be a man pleaser. The place at your work is a place where the will of God is executed. What's the second one? Stay away, abstain from pornography. This is the will of God. Even your sanctification. What's the third one? To 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse number 18. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God concerning you. Now, how can a man who's going through deep financial problem give thanks? How can a man who's going through some disease give thanks? How can a man who's going through difficult relationship give thanks? How can a man who's not successful give thanks? But that is the will of God concerning you, to give thanks where? In everything give thanks. How can you? The Bible is very clear. It says, you're not going to give thanks for the disease. You're not going to give thanks for the financial problem. In the problem, you'll give thanks. Are you getting the difference? Not for the issue, not for the sickness, not for the poverty, not for the difficult situation, but in such a situation you give thanks. How can a person give thanks? So there are two verses before that. Rejoice evermore, or rejoice always. Then it says, pray without ceasing. Then it says, in everything give thanks. You will not be able to rejoice unless you are able to see the result. But when you're going through a crisis, can you rejoice? When you're going through a dilemma, can you rejoice? Of course you cannot. Naturally speaking, you should not. And if you do, something is wrong with you. But God is asking you to rejoice. How can you rejoice? God is always asking you to see the omega view when you're going through the process of a situation. What is an omega view? It's right there. Hebrews chapter 12 verse number 2 goes on to say, who for the joy set before him was able to endure the cross. So when Jesus was being crucified, he was rejoicing. Why? Because he could see the result after the crucifixion. He could see the resurrection. Why? He spoke about it. Matthew 12:40, he said, you see, after 3 days to 3 nights, I will be raised up. He could see it. Because he could see it, he was able to rejoice in the situation. That's why he joyfully laid down his life for you, not crying that he was dying. What was the joy set before him? That he will go back and sit at the right hand side of the Father God. For that joy, he endured the cross. For the joy that you will be healed, you must rejoice today. For the joy that you will be prosperous, you must rejoice today. For the joy that everything will go on fine, you must begin to rejoice today. Because this is what you will do, because this is the will of God for you. And so he rejoiced. And then he prayed. Do you think on the cross he was praying? When you pray, what happens? You invite God into the situation. You invite the supernatural to overtake the natural. That's what happens when you pray. You invite God into the situation. Now imagine this. You can see the result and you have got God in the situation. Won't you give thanks? Won't you give thanks? Therefore it says, Give thanks. For this is the will of God concerning you. The first one is you'll be a God pleaser at your workplace. This is the will of God. Second one, you'll abstain from pornography. This is the will of God. The third one, in everything you'll give thanks. This is the will of God. Now, Hebrews chapter 10, verse number 36. After you've done the will of God, what have you got need for? Patience. After you've done the will of God, you're developing character. Now